The millionaire swore no maid could survive his daughter's silence, until the woman in red walked in and the twins called her Mama. Their real mother had been buried 2 years ago. So who exactly had they been waiting for? They said the Zarate twins were strange, two golden-haired girls who never cried, never spoke, never even looked up. Until the woman in red arrived, carrying something no one expected. A secret she should have buried years ago. Before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us to bring more thrilling stories. And trust me, and you won't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. In the quiet city of Savannah, Georgia, there lived a woman named Robin K. Coulston. She didn't rush through life. She didn't chase money or status like so many others did. She wore simple clothes, always neat, often red, and she moved through the world with the kind of calm that made people think she was carrying something heavy but holy. People called her old-fashioned. Some said she was too serious for a woman in her 30s, but Robin didn't mind. She believed that some hearts were meant to be still waters, not rushing rivers. Her grandmother once told her, "Child, the world is loud enough. You be the quiet it needs." So Robin carried those words like a lantern in her chest. She had worked in several homes before, caring for the elderly, tutoring troubled children, organizing estates for families too busy to notice their own lives falling apart. Robin was the same with everybody, the corporate executive's daughter and the single mother's son. She spoke gently, cleaned up messes without judgment, and always made sure the children under her care felt seen before they felt managed. One late afternoon, Robin stood at the window of her small Savannah apartment, watching storm clouds gather over the Spanish moss trees. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from a placement agency she'd worked with twice before. She opened it slowly. The message was short. "Ms. Coulston, we have an unusual case. Tech millionaire Lloyd J. Zarate in upstate New York. Twin daughters, ages 4. No staff has lasted more than 24 hours in 6 months. Multiple agencies have blacklisted the family. We're out of options. Your name came up through a referral we can't disclose. He's offering triple the standard rate. Can you be there by Friday?" Robin read it again. Then a third time. Lloyd J. Zarate. She knew that name, not from the news, from somewhere deeper, somewhere she'd tried to forget. The next morning, she boarded a plane. By late afternoon, a black car was winding through wooded roads toward an estate that looked more like a fortress than a home. Stone pillars, iron gates, windows that seemed to stare back at you. When Robin stepped out of the car, she saw him. Lloyd J. Zarate stood in the doorway, tall and stiff in a tailored gray suit. His face was blank, but his eyes, those eyes carried exhaustion like luggage he'd been dragging for years. "You're the 6th person this month," he said flatly, not even offering his hand. "I know," Robin replied calmly. "You won't last either." "Perhaps." He blinked, caught off guard by her lack of defense. Behind him, from somewhere deep in the house, came the faint sound of something breaking. Glass? A toy? He didn't even turn around. "They're upstairs," he said. "2nd floor, pink door on the left. The housekeeper will show you." But before Robin could move, a small voice, his voice cracked just slightly. "They don't talk. They don't eat unless you force them. And they don't sleep, so don't expect miracles." Robin looked at him, really looked. And what she saw wasn't a millionaire. She saw a man holding on by a thread. "I don't do miracles, Mr. Zarate," she said softly. "I do presents." By evening, Robin had been in the twins' room for 4 hours. The other staff watched from the hallway like she was walking into a lion's den. The room was beautiful. Pale yellow walls, stuffed animals arranged like a museum, 2 small beds with untouched quilts. But it felt cold, lifeless. In the corner sat 2 little girls, Alicia and Lyda, golden hair, identical faces, eyes that looked but didn't see. Robin didn't try to talk to them right away. She sat on the floor across from them, smoothed her red dress over her knees, and simply breathed. The housekeeper peeked in at 7 p.m. Robin was still sitting. At 9 p.m., Lloyd himself appeared in the doorway. Robin hadn't moved. "They won't respond," he said tiredly. "I know," Robin replied. "Then what are you doing?" She turned her head slightly, waiting for them to feel safe. He stared at her. Then he walked away. Robin stayed. She stayed through the thunder rolling outside. She stayed through the ticking of the antique clock. She stayed until the moon painted silver squares on the carpet. And then something shifted. One of the twins, Alicia, the one with the tiny mole near her ear, lifted her head. Her eyes met Robin's. Robin didn't smile, didn't move, just looked back. Slowly, carefully, Alicia stood. She walked across the room, her bare feet soundless on the rug. And then she climbed into Robin's lap. Lyda followed moments later. The 2 girls curled into Robin's arms like they were remembering something. Their breathing slowed. Their eyes closed. For the first time in 2 years, the Zarate twins fell asleep without screaming. When Lloyd came back an hour later, he froze in the doorway. There, under the dim glow of the nightlight, sat Robin in her red dress, holding his daughters like they had always belonged to her. His throat tightened. His hands clenched. "How?" he whispered. Robin looked up at him, her voice barely audible. They weren't waiting for someone to fix them, Mr. Zarate. They were waiting for someone who wouldn't ask them to be anything other than what they are. 3 days passed. The twins began to eat. They colored quietly. They even hummed, a sound that made the entire household stop what they were doing. One evening, Lloyd found Robin in the garden at sunset. She was picking wildflowers with the girls, their laughter soft and tentative. He stood there, watching, before finally speaking. "Why did you really take this job?" Robin's hands paused. She didn't turn around. "Because I believe some children are worth a second chance." "And what about me, Mary?" His voice cracked. "Do I get one?" She stood slowly, brushed the dirt from her dress, and finally met his eyes. "That depends, Mr. Zarate." Her voice was steady but laced with something he couldn't name. "Are you ready to hear the truth about the day your daughters were born?" Lloyd went pale. "What are you talking about?" Robin looked down at the twins, who were chasing a butterfly through the flower beds, oblivious. Then she looked back at him. "I worked at Sacred Heart Clinic 5 years ago. I was there the night your wife came in under an alias. I was there when the forms got mixed up. I was there when she whispered something to the doctor that made him send me out of the room." Lloyd's jaw clenched. "You're lying." "No, Mr. Zarate." Robin's voice was soft, but unshakable. "I'm the only one who's been telling you the truth since I got here." She turned and walked toward the girls, leaving him standing frozen in the fading light. He didn't know it yet, but Robin K. Coulston hadn't come to his estate for a paycheck. She had come because 5 years ago she made a promise to a dying woman, a woman with 2 names, 2 secrets, and 2 baby girls who would one day need someone to stand between them and the lies that built their world. And tonight, under a sky streaked with amber and shadow, that promise was about to unravel everything. But to understand why Robin Coulston stood in that garden holding a truth that could destroy a family, you have to go back. Back to a stormy April night in Savannah. Back to a clinic that no longer exists. Back to the moment Robin learned that sometimes doing the right thing means carrying a secret so heavy it bends your spine for the rest of your life. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, like this video, click subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. The Zarate estate was not a home. It was a monument to silence. Robin discovered this her first full morning there, as pale light crept through the tall windows and she walked the corridors with a cup of tea she'd made herself, in a kitchen that looked barely used. The hallways stretched endlessly, lined with dark wood paneling and oil paintings in gilded frames. Each footstep echoed like a question no one wanted to answer. She passed door after door. Most were closed. A few stood ajar, revealing rooms frozen in time, a library with leather chairs no one sat in, a dining room with a table set for 12 but covered in dust, a music room where a grand piano gathered shadows in the corner. But it was the second floor that unsettled her most. At the end of the eastern wing stood a door painted soft lavender, its surface unmarred except for a single handprint, small, child-sized, pressed near the bottom as if someone had tried to push it open and failed. Robin tried the handle, locked. She pressed her ear to the wood. Silence, but not the empty kind, the kind that holds its breath. That was Mrs. Zarate's nursery. Robin spun around. A woman stood behind her, 60-ish, steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun, eyes sharp as pins. She wore a plain black dress and sensible shoes, and carried herself like she'd been running this house long before Lloyd Zarate bought it. "Mrs. Hanley," the woman said flatly, "head housekeeper, you must be the new nanny." "Robin Coulston." She extended her hand. Mrs. Hanley looked at it but didn't take it. Instead, she glanced at the locked door, then back at Robin with something that might have been pity. "Don't try to open that room," she said. "Mr. Zarate's orders. No one goes in there." "Why?" "Because ghosts don't need visitors." Mrs. Hanley turned and started down the hall. "Follow me. There are rules you need to know." They descended to the main floor, where Mrs. Hanley led Robin into a small sitting room that smelled of lemon polish and old grief. She gestured to a chair, but remained standing herself, hands folded in front of her like a soldier at attention. "The girls wake at 7, she began, her voice clipped and efficient. "Breakfast is at 8. You'll feed them in their room, not the dining hall. Mr. Zarate doesn't take meals with them." Robin frowned. "Why not?" "Not your concern." Mrs. Hanley's expression didn't change. "They have lessons from 10 to noon. Numbers, letters, basic things. A tutor used to come, but the girls screamed until she left. You'll handle it yourself now." "And their father?" "Mr. Zarate works from his study. He doesn't like to be disturbed. He doesn't like noise. He doesn't—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He doesn't do well with crying." Robin leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Hanley, those girls are 4 years old. Children cry. It's how they communicate. The older woman's jaw tightened. Not in this house, they don't. Keep them quiet, Ms. Coulston. That's your only job. Keep them quiet, keep them fed, keep them out of his sight. Do that, and you'll last longer than the others. Robin studied her. Beneath the hard exterior, there was something else. Weariness, maybe even fear. How long have you worked here? Robin asked softly. 23 years. I knew Mrs. Zarate when she was still Evelyn Park. I watched her bring those girls home from the hospital. Her voice faltered, just for a moment. I watched her fade away. What happened to her? Mrs. Hanley's eyes went cold. She fell, down the stairs, middle of the night. Mr. Zarate found her at dawn. She straightened her shoulders. The house hasn't been the same since. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Miss Coulston. The portraits in the West Gallery, those are all of her, Mrs. Zarate. The girls like to stand in front of them sometimes. Don't stop them. It's the only time they seem human. Then she was gone, leaving Robin alone in the silent room with the weight of a house that felt more like a tomb. The twins' bedroom was on the second floor, pastel and perfect, and utterly lifeless. Robin found them where she'd left them that morning. Alicia sitting on the window seat staring at nothing. Lyda lying on the carpet tracing shapes in the air with one finger. Neither acknowledged her entrance. "Good morning," Robin said gently. No response. She set down the breakfast tray Mrs. Hanley had prepared. Soft-boiled eggs, toast, sliced fruit, the kind of meal meant to tempt small appetites. "I brought breakfast." The girls didn't move. Robin sat cross-legged on the floor between them. She didn't force, didn't coax. She simply began to eat her own toast, letting the moment breathe. Minutes passed. The food grew cold. Outside, birds called to each other in the garden. Finally, Robin began to hum. It was an old melody, one her grandmother used to sing while braiding her hair on sticky Georgia evenings. "Hush now, baby. The river runs low. Stars are watching wherever you go." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. Lyda's fingers stopped moving. Robin kept humming, eyes closed, letting the tune fill the spaces between them. When she opened her eyes, both girls were staring at her, not with fear, with recognition. Alicia tilted her head, bird-like. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to speak, but had forgotten how. Robin held out her hand, palm up, an invitation, not a demand. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Lyda crawled forward. Slowly, carefully, she placed her small hand in Robin's. Alicia followed. Robin didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She just squeezed their hands gently and kept humming. And for the first time since she'd arrived, the house felt less like a mausoleum and more like a place where something, someone, might still be able to heal. That night, the storm came. Thunder rolled across the hills like cannon fire. Lightning split the sky in jagged white veins. Rain hammered the windows so hard it sounded like the house itself was weeping. Robin was in the armchair beside the twins' beds, reading by lamplight, when she heard it. Whimpering. Both girls were sitting upright, eyes wide in the darkness, hands clutching their blankets. They weren't crying, not exactly, but their breath came in short, panicked gasps. Robin set down her book and knelt beside them. "It's just a storm," she said quietly. "It's loud, but it can't hurt you." Another crack of thunder. The lights flickered. Alicia made a sound, a tiny, broken noise that might have been the beginning of a scream. Robin opened her arms. "Come here." They came, both of them scrambling out of their beds and into her lap like they'd been waiting for permission their whole lives. Robin wrapped them in her embrace, feeling their small bodies tremble against her. She rocked slowly, side to side, and began to hum again. "Hush now, baby. The river runs low." Their breathing slowed. Their grip loosened. The storm raged on, but inside the circle of Robin's arms, the world grew still. By the time the rain softened to a whisper, both girls were asleep, cheeks pressed against Robin's shoulders, fingers tangled in the fabric of her red dress. Robin didn't move. She stayed there, holding them, even as her legs went numb and her back ached. She stayed because this was the promise. This was the reason. She didn't know Lloyd Zarate was standing in the doorway. He'd come upstairs when the storm started, expecting chaos, expecting screams, expecting to find another nanny cowering in the hallway, demanding a car to take her back to the city. Instead, he found this: a woman in red, cradling his daughters in the lamplight, humming a song he didn't recognize, but somehow wished he did. His throat tightened. His hands clenched at his sides. For 2 years, he'd watched his daughters flinch at every sound. For 2 years, they'd refused to sleep, refused to speak, refused to let anyone close. And now, in less than 3 days, this stranger had done what an army of professionals could not. "How did you do that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the fading rain. Robin looked up. Her eyes met his across the darkened room. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply held his gaze and said softly, "They were waiting for someone who wouldn't ask them to speak first." Lloyd stared at her, at his daughters, peaceful in her arms, at the woman who'd walked into his broken home and somehow made it feel less like a grave. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but instead, he just nodded once, barely a movement at all, and stepped back into the shadows of the hall. Behind him, the locked nursery door seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, and somewhere, deep in the house, a clock chimed midnight. The storm was over, but the reckoning had only just begun. The whispers started on Robin's 4th day. She noticed them in the way conversation stopped when she entered a room, in the way the younger housemaid, Clara, crossed herself whenever the twins passed by, in the way Mrs. Hanley's mouth tightened into a thin line when Robin asked for extra candles for the girls' evening routine. "You don't need candles," Mrs. Hanley had said curtly. "The lights work fine. They help the girls relax before bed." "The lights," Mrs. Hanley repeated, her voice sharp as broken glass, "work fine." But Robin had seen them flicker, 3 nights in a row, just as she tucked the twins in. A pulse of darkness, then light again, as if the house itself was holding its breath. It was Thomas, the young groundskeeper who came weekly to tend the roses, who finally spoke plainly. Robin had taken the girls outside that afternoon, their first time in the garden in months, according to Mrs. Hanley. They sat on a blanket under an old oak tree while Robin read from a picture book about rabbits. The twins didn't respond, but they didn't run either. That counted as progress. Thomas was trimming the hedges nearby, his pruning shears clicking rhythmically. When Robin glanced up, she caught him staring, not at her, but at the girls. His face had gone pale. "They're just children," Robin called out, keeping her voice light. Thomas flinched, nearly dropping his shears. "Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. You don't need to be afraid of them." He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression made Robin's skin prickle. "It's not them I'm afraid of," he said quietly. "It's what follows them." Robin stood, brushing grass from her dress. "What did you mean?" Thomas glanced back at the house, at the windows watching like dark eyes, and lowered his voice. "The last nanny before you found her crying in the pantry at 2 in the morning. Said she heard singing coming from the locked nursery, but when she checked, no one was there." "Dreams," Robin said firmly. "Stress. The gardener before me quit after 1 week. Said tools kept moving. He'd set down his rake, turn around, and it'd be 10 feet away. Wind. Forgetfulness." Thomas shook his head slowly. 3 maids fainted in that house in 6 months. Always in the same place. Bottom of the main staircase. Right where Mrs. Zarate. He trailed off. Robin crossed her arms. "Where she fell." "Where she died," Thomas corrected. His eyes flicked to the twins again. "People say those girls carry her with them. That Mrs. Zarate won't rest until what?" He stepped back, gripping his shears like a weapon. "I've said too much already. Just watch yourself, Ms. Coulston. This house doesn't let people leave the same way they came in." He turned and walked quickly toward the tool shed, leaving Robin standing alone with 2 silent girls and the creeping sensation that the garden shadows had grown longer in just the last few minutes. Robin didn't believe in curses. She believed in trauma, in grief, in the way fear could infect a place like mold behind wallpaper, invisible but spreading. So she did what she knew how to do. She brought in light. That evening, she opened every curtain in the twins' room. She moved their beds closer to the windows where morning sun would wake them. She brought up a small radio from the kitchen and played soft classical music. Vivaldi, Bach, something gentle and structured. She rearranged their meal times, their playtimes, their routines. Predictability, she knew, was an antidote to chaos. The twins watched her work with their strange owl-like stillness. When she turned on the radio, Lyda tilted her head. When Robin opened the curtains and golden afternoon light flooded in, Alicia squinted but didn't turn away. "There," Robin said, more to herself than them. "That's better, isn't it?" Neither girl answered, but when Robin sat down with a basket of wooden blocks and began stacking them, Lyda crawled closer. Progress. The velvet box appeared on her 5th night. Robin had been looking for a spare pillowcase in the old dresser near the window. Mrs. Hanley had mentioned linens were kept in the girls' room. When her fingers brushed against something small and square tucked behind a stack of embroidered blankets, she pulled it out. Navy blue velvet, no bigger than her palm, with a tiny brass clasp. Robin glanced at the twins. Both were asleep, curled together in Alicia's bed like 2 halves of one whole. She opened the box. Inside, nestled on faded silk, were 2 hospital bracelets, the kind they put on newborns. Tiny, plastic, faded but still legible. The first one read, Alicia A. Park. Birth date April 14th, 2021. Mother E. Park. The second, Lyda J. Gillum. Birth date April 14th, 2021. Mother E. Gillum. Robin stared at them. Same birth date, same hospital code stamped at the bottom. But different surnames, different mothers' names, even though both were clearly meant to be Evelyn. Her mind raced. Park. Gillum. Why would a mother register her own twins under 2 different last names? Why use 2 versions of her own name? Robin closed the box carefully and slid it back into the drawer. Her hands were shaking. This wasn't just grief. This wasn't just trauma. This was a secret, and someone had gone to great lengths to hide it. The next morning, Robin found Lloyd in his study. The room was all dark wood and leather, walls lined with books that looked unread. He sat behind a massive desk, staring at a laptop screen, his face illuminated by cold blue light. "Mr. Zarate?" He looked up, startled. Then his expression closed off, the way it always did when she appeared, like shutters slamming over windows. "The girls? They're fine, playing quietly upstairs." Robin stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I wanted to ask you something." His jaw tightened. "About?" "About their mother." The air in the room changed. It was subtle, a shift in pressure, like before a storm, but Robin felt it. "What about her?" His voice was flat, dangerous. "Mrs. Hanley mentioned she fell. That it was an accident." "It was. But she also said Mrs. Zarate's maiden name was Park." Robin kept her tone gentle, careful. "Is that right?" Lloyd's fingers curled into fists on the desk. "Why are you asking?" "Because I found something. In the twins' room, 2 hospital bracelets with different—" "Where?" He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "Where did you find those?" Robin held her ground. "In a drawer. I was looking for linens and—" "You had no right." His voice was low, trembling with something between rage and panic. "Those were private. You had no right to—" "Mr. Zarate!" Robin's voice cut through his rising fury, calm and steady. "I'm not here to invade your privacy. I'm here to help your daughters. But I can't do that if there are secrets in this house that affect them." He stared at her. His face had gone pale, his breathing shallow. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then help me understand." "No." He moved around the desk, pointing toward the door. "You're here to care for the girls. That's all. Their mother is dead. The past is dead. Leave it buried." Robin didn't move. "Why do they have different surnames?" "Get out." "Why did your wife register them under 2 different names?" "Get out." His voice cracked like a whip. Robin studied him, this man who looked like he was barely holding himself together, who flinched whenever his daughters cried, who had built a fortress of silence around his grief. She nodded slowly. "All right. But Mr. Zarate?" She paused at the door. "Whatever you're protecting them from, it's hurting them more than helping them." She left him standing there, hands shaking, staring at the place where she'd been. That night, Robin couldn't sleep. She sat in the armchair by the twins' beds, watching them breathe in the darkness. The moonlight painted silver stripes across the floor. Alicia A. Park, Lyda J. Gillum. Different surnames, same birthday, same mother. Why? Robin thought about Lloyd's reaction, the panic in his eyes, the way he'd shut down the moment she mentioned the bracelets. He wasn't just grieving. He was hiding something. And somewhere in this house of shadows and locked doors and whispered curses, the truth was waiting. Robin stood and walked to the window. Outside, the garden stretched into darkness. Beyond them, the woods pressed close. A wall of black trees against the night sky. She thought of Thomas's words, "This house doesn't let people leave the same way they came in." Robin pressed her palm against the cold glass. "I'm not leaving," she whispered to her reflection. "Not until I understand what happened here." Behind her, one of the twins stirred in her sleep. And from somewhere deep in the house, from the locked nursery at the end of the hall, came a sound, soft, rhythmic, almost like humming. Robin turned, heart pounding, but the hallway was empty. The house held its breath, and Robin knew with bone-deep certainty that she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The truth was coming. Whether she was ready or not, Robin began with paint. She found the watercolor set in a forgotten corner of the estate's art studio, a room on the third floor that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Dust covered the canvases stacked against the wall. Brushes stood in jars like dried flowers. But the paints were still good, rich blues and warm yellows, deep reds and soft greens. She brought them to the twins' room along with thick paper and 3 small cups of water. "We're going to make something beautiful," she said, spreading the supplies across the floor. The girls watched from their separate corners, Alicia on the window seat, Lyda under the desk. Always apart. Always watching. Robin dipped her brush in blue and made a long, sweeping stroke across the paper. Sky, then green for grass, yellow for sun. She didn't ask them to join, didn't coax or beg. She simply painted, humming softly, letting the colors speak for themselves. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then a small shadow fell across the paper. Lyda had crept closer. Her eyes followed Robin's brush with an intensity that made Robin's chest tighten. Robin held out a clean brush. "Would you like to try?" Lyda stared at the brush, at Robin, at the paper. Then, slowly, so slowly, her small hand reached out and took it. Robin dipped it in red for her. "Any way you want. There's no wrong way." Lyda touched the brush to paper, a single dot of red, bright as a heartbeat. Then another and another. By the time Alicia joined them, the paper was covered in dots. Red and yellow and blue, scattered like stars across a white sky. Neither girl spoke. But when Robin looked up, both were smiling. It was the smallest curve of lips, barely there. But it was something, and something was everything. The rituals became sacred. Every morning at 9, they walked the garden path, Robin in front, the twins following like small ghosts in matching white dresses. They didn't hold her hand, not yet, but they stayed close, watching butterflies, touching flowers, listening to the wind move through the trees. Every afternoon at 3, they painted. Sometimes landscapes, sometimes just colors bleeding into each other. The twins never spoke, but their paintings grew bolder. Lyda's reds became slashes of joy. Alicia's blues deepened into something that looked like ocean. Every evening at 7, before bed, Robin sang, always the same song, the lullaby from her grandmother, the melody that felt older than memory. "Hush now, baby, the river runs low. Stars are watching wherever you go. Morning will find you, safe in the light. Sleep now, my darling, through the long night." The twins would crawl into their beds, eyes fixed on Robin's face as she sang. And by the final verse, their breathing would slow. Their eyes would close. Peace, thin and fragile as spun glass, would settle over the room. But Robin never stayed peaceful for long, because every time she sang that song, she remembered. Savannah, Georgia. 5 years ago. The hospital room had been too bright, fluorescent lights humming overhead like angry bees. Robin had sat in the plastic chair beside the incubator, her body still aching from labor, her heart already shattered. The baby, her baby, had been so small, barely 4 pounds, Born too early because Robin's body had given up, had failed, had let her daughter slip into the world before she was ready. Respiratory distress, the doctor had said. We're doing everything we can. But Robin had known. In that terrible animal way mothers know things. She'd known her daughter was slipping away. So she'd sung. Pressed her hand against the warm plastic of the incubator and sang the only song she could remember. The lullaby her grandmother had taught her. The one that was supposed to protect children. To wrap them in invisible armor, made of love and memory. Hush now, baby. The river runs low. Her daughter had died at 3:47 a.m. Robin had been singing the final verse. She'd never spoken about it. Not to her family. Not to the grief counselor the hospital assigned her. Not to anyone. She'd simply packed up her life, quit her nursing job and moved away from Savannah as fast as she could run. But the song had followed her. It lived in her bones now, in the hollow place where her daughter should have been, and now she sang it for someone else's children. It felt like betrayal and redemption all at once. Lloyd Zarate had started watching her. Robin noticed it in small ways first. The way he appeared in doorways at odd hours, standing there silent, arms crossed, face unreadable. The way his study door was always cracked open when she walked past, his shadow visible behind the desk. One morning, she found him in the garden at dawn, sitting on the stone bench near the roses. He looked like he hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed. "Mr. Zarate?" Robin approached carefully. "Are you all right?" He looked up at her with eyes so tired they seemed bruised. "How do you do it?" His voice was hoarse. "Do what? Make them—" He gestured vaguely toward the house. "Make them be again. Make them look like children, instead of—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "Ghosts." Robin sat beside him, leaving space between them. The morning air was cool. Dew sparkled on the grass like scattered diamonds. "I don't make them do anything," she said gently. "I just give them room to remember how." Their mother tried everything. Lloyd's hands curled into fists on his knees. Specialists, therapists, special diets. Nothing worked. They just got quieter, more distant. After she died, they stopped completely. Stopped eating. Stopped sleeping. Stopped being alive in any way that mattered. "They're grieving," Robin said. "Children grieve differently than adults. They hold it inside until they feel safe enough to let it out. And you make them feel safe." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Or maybe a plea. Robin didn't answer right away. She watched a bird hop across the lawn, hunting for worms in the soft earth. "I lost a child once," she said quietly. "A daughter. She died when she was 3 days old." Lloyd went very still. "I know what it's like," Robin continued, "to stand in a room with someone you love and not be able to reach them. To watch them slip away and know you're powerless. Your daughters. They're not slipping away, Mr. Zarate. They're just waiting to be found." Lloyd stared at her. Then, almost too quiet to hear. "I don't know how to find them." "You start," Robin said, "by not being afraid of them." He flinched like she'd struck him, but before he could respond, both of them heard it, a sound from the house. High and clear laughter. They both turned. Through the open window of the twins' room, floating down like bells across the morning air, came the sound of children laughing. Lloyd stood abruptly, face pale. "That's not possible." Robin stood too. "Yes, it is." She walked back toward the house, leaving him standing frozen in the garden, staring up at the window where his daughter's joy, their impossible, miraculous joy, echoed into the breaking day. That afternoon, as Robin sat on the floor watching the twins paint, something strange happened. Alicia was humming. Not loudly, not clearly, but definitely humming, and the melody. Robin's brush stopped mid-stroke. It was her song, the lullaby, but Alicia was humming it in a different key, with small variations Robin had never taught her. "Where did you learn that?" Robin whispered. Alicia looked up, eyes wide and startlingly blue. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it. But she pointed across the room to the dresser where Robin had found the velvet box, to the photograph sitting there in a silver frame. A woman with dark hair and gentle eyes, holding two newborn babies wrapped in pink blankets. Evelyn Zarate. Robin's heart stuttered. "Your mother sang that to you," she said softly. Alicia nodded, once, firmly. Lyda looked up too, abandoning her painting. She pointed at the photograph, then at Robin, then back at the photograph. A question Robin didn't understand. "What is it, sweetheart? What are you trying to tell me?" But Lyda just shook her head and crawled into Robin's lap, pressing her face against Robin's shoulder. And Robin sat there, holding this child who wasn't hers, humming a song that somehow connected her to a dead woman she'd never met. Except Robin's breath caught. Sacred Heart Clinic. 5 years ago, there had been another woman giving birth that night. Robin had been assigned to 2 patients because the hospital was understaffed. She'd bounced between rooms, barely keeping up. One patient had been straightforward, Robin's own complicated delivery. But the other woman had used a false name, had been terrified, had sent her husband away and refused to let anyone stay except the doctor. And Robin, who'd held her hand through contractions, who'd brought her ice chips, who'd sung to calm her when she'd started to panic. The same song. "Hush now, baby. The river runs low." Robin's hands began to shake. That woman had given birth to twins. Robin remembered now, remembered the chaos when the babies came too fast, when the paperwork got confused, when— "Oh my God," Robin whispered. "Evelyn." It had been Evelyn Zarate in that delivery room. Robin had been there. She'd held the babies when they were minutes old. She'd wrapped them in blankets. She'd sung to them while their mother was stitched up and exhausted. And somehow, impossibly, the twins remembered, not consciously, but in their bones, in their blood. They recognized her voice, her song, the hands that had first welcomed them into the world. Robin looked down at the 2 girls in her arms, their small bodies warm and trusting against hers. "I knew you," she breathed. "I knew you before you even knew yourselves." And in the photograph on the dresser, Evelyn Zarate smiled her gentle, frozen smile, as if she'd known this moment would come, as if she'd been waiting for Robin all along. The locked nursery haunted Robin's dreams. Every night, she lay in the small guest room across from the twins, staring at the ceiling, thinking about that lavender door at the end of the hall, the handprint pressed near the bottom, the silence that held its breath behind the wood. That was Mrs. Zarate's nursery, Mrs. Hanley had said. No one goes in there. But Robin couldn't stop thinking about the baby bracelets, the 2 surnames, the way Evelyn had used a false name at the hospital 5 years ago. Something was hidden in this house, something that explained why 2 identical girls born on the same day had been registered as if they belonged to different mothers. and Robin was certain the answer lived behind that locked door. It happened on her 10th night. She'd waited until the house fell into its deepest sleep, that dead hour between 2 and 3 a.m. when even the walls seemed to exhale. The twins were peaceful in their beds, curled together like parentheses around empty space. Robin slipped into the hallway wearing only her nightgown and cardigan, bare feet silent on the runner carpet. She carried a small flashlight and a hairpin she'd bent into a makeshift lockpick. Her grandmother had taught her that trick years ago. "Never know when you'll need to open what's closed," she'd said with a wink. Robin had never imagined she'd use it to break into a dead woman's nursery. The lavender door stood at the end of the hall like a sentinel. Robin approached slowly, listening for any sound: footsteps, breathing, the creak of floorboards. Nothing. She knelt before the lock, hands trembling slightly. The hairpin slid in easily. She twisted, felt for the mechanism, applied gentle pressure. Click. The lock gave. Robin's heart hammered against her ribs. She glanced behind her one more time, then pushed the door open. The hinges made no sound, as if they'd been waiting for her. Inside, the nursery was frozen in time. 2 white cribs stood against opposite walls, their mobiles still hanging overhead. Little moons and stars that swayed gently in the air current from the open door. A rocking chair sat by the window, a pale blanket draped over its arm. Shelves lined with books and stuffed animals. Everything perfectly arranged. But there was dust. So much dust. No one had been in this room for years. Robin stepped inside, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. She moved to the closet, a large walk-in space with built-in shelves. Baby clothes hung in neat rows. Boxes labeled in careful handwriting. Newborn, 3 to 6 months. Keepsakes. Robin pulled down the keepsakes box. Inside, hospital bracelets, first shoes, lock of hair tied with ribbon. And beneath it all, pushed to the very bottom, a small wooden chest with brass corners. Robin lifted it out. It was heavy, locked. But the lock was old, decorative. One hard twist with the hairpin, and it popped open. Inside were documents. Robin's hands shook as she lifted them out. First, 2 birth certificates, yellowed with age. Certificate 1, name, Alicia Ann Park. Date of birth, April 14th, 2021. Place, Sacred Heart. Clinic, Savannah, Georgia. Mother, Evelyn Ann Park. Father, blank, certificate. 2, name, Lyda Jane Gillum. Date of birth, April 14th, 2021. Place, Mercy, General Hospital, Atlanta, Georgia. Mother, Evelyn Jane Gillum. Father, blank. Robin stared at them, mind racing. 2 different hospitals, 2 different cities, but the same birth date. The same mother, just different versions of her name. This is impossible, Robin thought, unless Evelyn had filed false documents. Unless she'd deliberately created 2 separate identities for her daughters. But why? Robin dug deeper into the chest. Photographs. Evelyn, heavily pregnant, standing alone in what looked like a hotel room. Evelyn holding 2 newborns, no one else in the frame. Evelyn looking exhausted and terrified. Dark circles under her eyes. And at the very bottom, a letter. The paper was half burned, edges black and crumbling, as if someone had tried to destroy it but stopped halfway. Robin held it carefully under the flashlight beam. Lloyd, you have to know the truth. I can't carry this alone anymore. The girls deserve to know who they really are, and you deserve to know what I did. That night at the clinic, When everything went wrong, when they told me there were complications, I panicked. I called him. I know I shouldn't have, but I was scared and alone, and you were traveling, and He came. He held my hand through the delivery. He was there when they cut Lyda out, because she wasn't breathing, and I thought I was going to lose her, and… Lloyd, I need to tell you about… The letter ended there, burned away. The rest of the truth lost to flame. Robin sat back on her heels, chest tight. He came. He held my hand. Not Lloyd. Someone else. Someone Evelyn had called in her moment of terror, and whoever it was had been there when the twins were born. Robin's mind spun with possibilities, each one worse than the last. An affair, a secret relationship, a biological father who wasn't Lloyd Zarate. One of the twins may not be his, Robin thought, remembering her own story outline. But which one? And did Lloyd know? She was so lost in thought she didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. Didn't hear them until they were right behind her. "What the hell are you doing?" Robin spun around, flashlight falling from her hand and rolling across the floor. Lloyd Zarate stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. His face was in shadow, but his voice was pure rage. Robin started. "You broke into this room." He stepped inside, advancing on her. "This room has been locked for 2 years. How dare you?" "Mr. Zarate, I can explain." "Explain?" He grabbed the birth certificates from her hands, eyes scanning them in the dim light. His face went white. "Where did you find these?" "In the chest, in the closet. I was looking for… You were snooping." He crumpled the papers in his fist. "You were digging through my dead wife's things like some kind of… I was looking for the truth." Robin stood, facing him. "Because your daughters deserve to know why they have 2 different surnames. Why they were registered in 2 different cities. Why their mother was so terrified she filed false documents." Lloyd's hand shot out and gripped her arm. "You need to leave. Now. Pack your things and get out of my house." "No." "Excuse me?" "No," Robin repeated, pulling her arm free. "I'm not leaving those girls. Not when they've finally started to heal. Not when they've finally started to trust someone. They'll trust whoever I hire next. There won't be a next." Robin's voice rose. "There have been 25 people before me, Mr. Zarate. 25 people who couldn't reach them, who couldn't help them. And you want to throw away the one person who actually can, because I found some papers you were too afraid to burn properly." Lloyd's jaw clenched. "You don't understand. Then help me understand." Robin gestured to the half-burned letter still on the floor. "Who was he? Who did your wife call that night? Who was there when your daughters were born? That's none of your concern. Everything about those girls is my concern." Robin stepped closer, her voice dropping to something quieter, but more fierce. "I was there, Mr. Zarate. 5 years ago. At Sacred Heart Clinic. I was the nurse who held your wife's hand. I was the one who wrapped your daughters in blankets. I was the one who sang to them when they wouldn't stop crying." Lloyd stared at her, face ashen. "What?" "Your wife used the name Evelyn Park that night. She was alone. Terrified. And I helped bring your daughters into this world." Robin's eyes burned. "So yes, I broke into this room. Yes, I found documents you wanted to keep hidden. But I did it because those 2 little girls sleeping across the hall deserve to know the truth about who they are before your secrets poison them the way they've poisoned you." For a long moment, Lloyd said nothing, He just stood there, trembling, the crumpled birth certificate still clutched in his hand. Then, from across the hall, a sound. Crying. Both of them froze. The twins. Both of them. Crying loud and clear. Not silent tears, but full-throated sobs. Lloyd's face crumpled. They've never, since their mother died. They've never. Robin was already moving. She pushed past him and ran to the twins' room. Both girls were sitting up in their beds, tears streaming down their faces, arms outstretched toward the door. Toward her. "Robin!" Alicia's voice, clear as a bell. The first word Robin had ever heard her speak. "Robin! Don't go! Don't leave us!" Lyda sobbed. Robin dropped to her knees between their beds, gathering them both into her arms. "I'm here. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Promise?" Alicia's small hands fisted in Robin's nightgown. "I promise." Lloyd stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame as if he might collapse without it. He watched his daughters cling to this stranger. Watched them speak for the first time in 2 years. Watched them choose her over the silence they'd wrapped themselves in like armor. His voice came out broken. "What are you looking for?" Robin looked up at him over the twins' heads. Her eyes were fierce and certain. "The truth," she said, "before it destroys what little peace your daughters have left." Lloyd's hand fell from the door frame. He looked at his daughters, really looked at them, for what might have been the first time since their mother died. Then he looked at Robin, and slowly, like a dam breaking, he nodded. "All right," he whispered. "All right." The twins fell asleep in Robin's arms, and in the hallway, the lavender door stood open, waiting. The morning came too quickly. Robin sat in the kitchen nursing cold coffee, watching dawn break over the gardens through the window. She hadn't slept after Lloyd's quiet surrender in the hallway, hadn't been able to close her eyes without seeing that half-burned letter, those 2 birth certificates, the terrified look on Evelyn Zarate's face in those photographs. "If anything happens to me, tell Lloyd the girls aren't the same." The memory had surfaced sometime around 4 a.m., rising from the depths of her mind like something drowned, finally, floating to the surface. Evelyn had said that. Robin remembered it now with crystalline clarity. She'd been so focused on her own crisis that night, her own premature daughter struggling to breathe, that she'd filed Evelyn's whispered words away, as fever talk, fear talk, the kind of thing women said when they thought they were dying. But Evelyn hadn't been delirious. She'd been confessing. Robin's hands trembled around the coffee mug. She set it down before she dropped it. "You're up early." Robin startled. Lloyd stood in the doorway wearing yesterday's clothes, looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. His eyes were red-rimmed. His hair stood at odd angles. "I couldn't sleep," Robin said quietly. "Neither could I." He moved to the coffee pot, poured himself a cup with mechanical precision. The girls? Still sleeping. They wore themselves out crying. They spoke. His voice cracked on the word. For the first time in 2 years, they spoke. "Yes." Lloyd leaned against the counter, staring into his coffee like it might hold answers. "You said you were there. The night they were born." Robin nodded slowly. "Yeah, tell me." It wasn't a request, but it wasn't quite a demand either. It was the sound of a man standing on the edge of a cliff, asking someone to either pull him back or push him over. Robin took a deep breath. It was April 14th, 2021. A Thursday night. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. She clasped them in her lap. I was working at Sacred Heart Clinic in Savannah. Small facility, mostly routine deliveries. I was assigned to 2 patients that night because we were understaffed. One was myself. Lloyd's head snapped up. You were... I was in labor, Robin said quietly. 32 weeks. Premature rupture of membranes. They'd admitted me that afternoon and said I'd probably deliver within 24 hours. She paused, gathering herself. The other patient was your wife. Lloyd set his coffee down with shaking hands. She came in around 8 p.m., Robin continued. Checked in under the name Evelyn Park. No one with her, no husband, no family. She was terrified. I remember that clearly. Kept asking if anyone had followed her. Kept looking at the door like someone might burst through it. I was in London, Lloyd said hoarsely. Business trip. She told me everything was fine. That the babies weren't due for another month. That there was no reason to come home early. She lied. Robin's voice was gentle but firm. She was already in active labor when she arrived. Contractions 7 minutes apart. She must have been having symptoms for hours before she came in. Lloyd's face twisted. Why wouldn't she call me? Why would she? Because she called someone else instead. The words hung in the air like smoke. Lloyd's hands curled into fists on the counter. Who? I don't know. I only saw him from behind. He came in around 9:30, right as things started getting complicated. Your wife must have called him while I was checking on my own condition. Robin closed her eyes, pulling up the memory. He was tall, dark hair, expensive coat. The nurses tried to stop him, said only family was allowed. But your wife insisted, said he was her brother. She doesn't have a brother. I know that now. Lloyd's breath came faster. What happened next? Everything went wrong at once. Robin stood, needing to move, to pace. Around 10 p.m., the power went out. Storm had knocked down lines all over the city. The clinic's backup generator kicked in, but only for essential equipment. Half the lights died. The computers went down, including the system that tracks patient records. She moved to the window, staring out at the garden, where just yesterday she'd watched the twins laugh. My daughter came first. Born at 10:47 p.m. She wasn't breathing. Robin's voice went flat. They took her to the NICU. I was bleeding too much. Everything was chaos. I'm sorry, Lloyd whispered. Robin nodded, but didn't turn around. Your wife delivered 15 minutes later, but there were complications. The first twin came easily, but the second was breech. Stuck, not getting enough oxygen. They had to do an emergency C-section right there in the delivery room because there wasn't time to move her to surgery. Jesus! The man who'd come in with her, he held her hand through it. I was in the next room, barely conscious from blood loss, but I could hear your wife screaming. And then I heard babies crying. Robin's voice broke. 2 healthy babies, while mine was dying 3 doors down. Silence filled the kitchen like water. Finally, Lloyd spoke. What about the paperwork errors? When the power came back at midnight, nothing matched up. The computer system had crashed mid-documentation. Admission forms were handwritten and chaotic. Someone had switched patient files. The nurse who'd been handling intake quit 2 days later, just walked out, and never came back. Robin turned to face him. By the time the hospital sorted everything out, there were 2 birth certificates issued for your daughters. One filed from Sacred Heart Clinic in Savannah under the name Evelyn Park. Another filed 3 days later from Mercy General in Atlanta under Evelyn Gillum. I assume your wife went to Atlanta after she left Sacred Heart, filed a second set of documents. 2 different surnames. 2 different maternal identities. Almost like she was creating insurance. Or hiding evidence. Lloyd slid down the cabinet until he was sitting on the floor, head in his hands. Why would she do that? Robin knelt in front of him. Because she was protecting someone, or protecting you. Or both. From what? From the truth about who the girl's father really is. The words fell like stones into deep water. Lloyd looked up, eyes devastated. Which one? What? Which daughter isn't mine? His voice was barely audible. Which one belongs to him? Robin reached out, gripped his shoulders. Lloyd, listen to me. I don't know if either of them isn't yours. I'm just telling you what your wife said. What did she say? Exactly. Robin closed her eyes, pulling up the moment. It was right before they transferred me to surgery. My daughter was already gone. They'd just told me. I was barely coherent. But I passed your wife's room on the gurney, and she reached out and grabbed my hand. Robin's voice dropped to a whisper, matching the memory. She said, if anything happens to me, tell Lloyd the girls aren't the same. I asked her what she meant, but the orderlies were already pushing me away. And then, Robin opened her eyes. And then I lost consciousness. When I woke up, your wife was gone, discharged herself against medical advice. I never saw her again. Lloyd stared at her. The girls aren't the same. What does that mean? I think it means exactly what you're afraid it means. Robin's voice was steady now. One of your daughters has a different biological father. No! Lloyd shook his head violently. No, Evelyn wouldn't. We were happy. We were trying to get pregnant. She wouldn't have. People are complicated, Robin said gently. Marriages are complicated. Maybe she made a mistake. Maybe there's an explanation that doesn't break everything you believed about her. But, Mr. Zarate, Lloyd, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that one of those little girls sleeping upstairs doesn't share your DNA. Lloyd's face crumpled. How am I supposed to look at them and not wonder? How am I supposed to— You love them, Robin said fiercely. That's how. You love them the way you've always loved them. Because DNA doesn't make someone a father. Being there does. Showing up does. Choosing them does. I want a DNA test. Lloyd, I need to know. He stood abruptly, pacing. I need to know which one is mine, which one is his. I need to know if I've been raising another man's child for 4 years. I need— You might win the truth, Robin said quietly, but lose your daughters. Lloyd froze. If you test them, Robin continued, if you find out that one of them isn't biologically yours, what then? Do you love her less? Do you look at her differently? Do you pull away? She stood, facing him across the kitchen. Because children feel that. They know when a parent withdraws, and those girls have already lost their mother. If they lose you too, even partially. I wouldn't, Lloyd's voice broke. I would never stop loving them. Are you sure? The question hung between them. Lloyd's hands trembled. His face was pale. I don't know, he whispered. God help me. I don't know. Robin moved closer. Then maybe that's your answer. Maybe you're not ready to know. Maybe neither of us is. But you'll always wonder now, Lloyd said bitterly. Every time you look at them, you'll wonder which one. No, Robin's voice was firm. I look at them and see 2 little girls who need love and stability, and parents who don't treat them like a mystery to be solved. That's all. Lloyd stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Robin asked. "Calling a private testing company. The best one. Discreet. Fast results." His thumb hovered over the screen. "I need to know. Lloyd, I need to know." His eyes met hers, desperate and drowning. "You said it yourself. The truth is already destroying what little peace they have left. So either we face it now, or we let it rot everything from the inside out." Robin wanted to argue, wanted to take the phone from his hands and throw it out the window. But she understood, because she'd spent 5 years running from her own truth, 5 years pretending her daughter had never existed. And look where it had gotten her, standing in a stranger's kitchen, haunted by lullabies and memories she'd tried to bury. "All right," she said quietly, "but we do it together. And we protect those girls, no matter what the results say." Lloyd nodded, fingers moving across the screen. Together. Within the hour, an appointment was scheduled. A private lab technician would arrive that afternoon, discreet and professional. Cheek swabs from Lloyd and both twins. Results in 72 hours. Robin stood at the kitchen window, watching the twins play in the garden. Alicia chasing butterflies, Lyda picking flowers. Both of them smiling in the morning sun. They looked so peaceful, so innocent. They had no idea that in 3 days their entire world might shatter. And Robin, who'd come to save them, had just helped light the match. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by courier in a plain manila package. Robin signed for it at the door, while the twins napped upstairs, their small bodies curled together in Alicia's bed like they'd done every afternoon since they'd started speaking. She'd been reading to them, Where the Wild Things Are, and their eyes had grown heavy halfway through Max's journey home. The courier was young, professional, discreet. He didn't ask questions, just handed her the package, had her sign the tablet, and disappeared back into his unmarked sedan. Robin stood in the foyer holding the envelope like it was burning her hands. Lloyd was in town, a rare trip to his office. Some emergency board meeting he couldn't avoid. Mrs. Hanley was in the kitchen preparing dinner. The house was quiet except for the ancient grandfather clock ticking in the hall, counting down to a moment that would change everything. "You should wait for him," Robin thought. "This isn't yours to open alone." But her hands were already tearing the seal. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Clinical. Precise. No emotion in the typed letters. No awareness of the bomb they contained. Confidential DNA paternity analysis. Subject A, Lloyd Jonathan Zarate. Subject B, Alicia Ann Zarate. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Conclusion, Subject A is the biological father of Subject B. Robin's heart hammered. 1 down. She forced herself to keep reading. Subject A, Lloyd Jonathan Zarate. Subject C, Lyda Jane Zarate. Probability of paternity, 0.02%. Conclusion, Subject A is not the biological father of Subject C. The paper trembled in Robin's hands. "Oh, dear Lyda," she read on, though her vision was blurring. Additional analysis. Requested, per client instructions, we conducted extended genealogical matching using public databases. Results indicate probable biological father of Subject C, Marcus James Gillum. DOB, March 12, 1987. DOD, October 3, 2023. Occupation, session musician, Atlanta, GA. Relationship to Subject A, none. Relationship to Evelyn Ann Zarate, Ney Park. See attached obituary link. Robin's hands went numb. Marcus Gillum. Dead 2 years ago, the same accident that killed Evelyn. She pulled out her phone with shaking fingers, typed his name into the search bar. The first result was an obituary. Marcus James Gillum, 36, of Atlanta, died October 3, 2023, following a vehicle accident on Highway 85. Marcus was a talented guitarist and session musician who worked with numerous recording artists throughout the Southeast. He is survived by his mother, Patricia Gillum of Macon, and sister, Claire Gillum Ross of Nashville. Memorial services were held October 8th at Riverside Chapel. Robin clicked on images, and there he was, tall, dark hair, gentle eyes, holding a guitar in most photos, smiling that easy smile musicians have. And in one photo, partially cropped but unmistakable, a woman standing beside him, dark hair pulled back, pregnant belly visible beneath a summer dress. Evelyn. Robin zoomed in, hands trembling. The photo was dated June 2021, 2 months after the twins were born. "Oh, Evelyn," Robin thought. "What did you do?" Her mind raced, piecing together the story from fragments. An affair. Maybe before Lloyd. Maybe during. It didn't matter now. A musician named Gillum, who'd fathered one of the twins. Evelyn, terrified and pregnant, not knowing which baby belonged to which man until after they were born. The chaos of that night at the clinic, calling Marcus instead of Lloyd, filing false documents to cover her tracks, creating 2 separate identities for her daughters just in case she ever needed an escape route. And then, 2 years later, dying in a car accident. With Marcus Gillum behind the wheel. Robin's stomach turned. They were together, she realized. When they died, they were together. She looked down at the paper again, at Lyda's name, at the cold, clinical proof that this child, this beautiful, silent, golden-haired child who'd finally learned to smile again, didn't belong to the man who'd raised her. And Lloyd would never forgive that. Robin knew it with bone-deep certainty. She'd seen the fear in his eyes when he'd ordered the test, the way his voice had cracked when he'd asked which one. He loved his daughters. She believed that. But this truth would poison everything. He'd look at Lyda and see betrayal, see his dead wife's lies, see another man's child, and Lyda would feel it. Children always did. Robin's gaze drifted to the fireplace in Lloyd's study, visible through the open doorway across the hall. "You might win the truth, but lose your daughters." She'd said that. She'd warned him. But he'd insisted. And now Robin held the match. She didn't think, didn't let herself hesitate. Robin walked into the study, knelt before the cold fireplace, and pulled a lighter from the desk drawer. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. "Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is keep a secret that would hurt more than help." The flame caught the edge of the paper. Orange light bloomed across the clinical text, eating through probability and conclusion and biological father, turning truth to ash. Robin watched it burn, tears streaming down her face. For Lyda, for the little girl who'd just learned to speak, who'd just learned to trust, who'd just started believing the world might be safe again. For Evelyn, who'd died trying to protect her daughters from exactly this moment. For Lloyd, who would never have to make the choice between truth and love. The paper curled and blackened. Within minutes, nothing remained but ash. Robin swept it into the fireplace grate, buried it beneath old logs, and stood on shaking legs. She was still standing there when she heard the front door open, Lloyd's footsteps in the foyer, his voice calling out, "Robin, girls!" She turned, wiping her face, trying to compose herself. But when he appeared in the study doorway, he took one look at her and froze. "What happened?" His voice went sharp. "Are the girls?" "They're fine. They're sleeping." His eyes darted around the room, landing on the empty manila envelope on the desk. The results came. It wasn't a question. Robin said nothing. "Where are they?" Lloyd moved forward. "The papers. Where are the results?" "Gone." "What do you mean, gone?" Robin lifted her chin. "I burned them." The color drained from Lloyd's face. "You what?" "I burned them," she repeated, voice steady now. "Before you could read them. Before you could do something you'd regret." "You had no right." Lloyd's voice rose to a shout. "Those were my results. My daughters. My right to know." "And what would you have done with that knowledge?" Robin stepped toward him. "Tell me, if one of those girls isn't yours biologically, what then?" "That's not your decision to make. Someone had to make it." Robin's voice broke. "Because you were ready to sacrifice your daughter's happiness for your own need to know. You were ready to let truth destroy what love had already fixed." Lloyd grabbed her shoulders. "Which one? Tell me which one isn't mine." "No. Tell me." "No." Robin wrenched free. "I won't do that to them. I won't do that to you. Because the moment you know, everything changes. You'll look at her differently, hold her differently, love her differently, and she'll feel it. Lloyd, she'll spend the rest of her life wondering why her father pulled away, why she's not enough, why love has conditions. I would never—" "You already are," Robin's voice cracked. "You've been pulling away from both of them since their mother died, using work as an excuse, locking yourself in this study, keeping them at arm's length because you're terrified of feeling anything at all." Lloyd's face twisted. "You don't understand." "I understand that you're drowning," Robin said quietly. "I understand that your wife betrayed you and died before you could forgive her. I understand that you look at those girls and see all the ways you failed them, failed her, failed yourself. Stop. But those girls upstairs, they don't see any of that. They just see their father, the only parent they have left. And they're choosing to love you anyway." Silence filled the room like water. Lloyd's hands hung at his sides, trembling. His eyes were red. His voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "You manipulated me." "Yes. You destroyed evidence I paid for. Evidence that was legally mine." "Yes." "You made a decision about my children without my consent." "Yes," Robin said. "I did. And I'd do it again." Lloyd stared at her. Then he turned and walked out of the study. Robin heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard him pause outside the twins' room. She held her breath. Then she heard the door open, heard his voice rough with emotion. "Alicia! Lyda? Can Daddy come in?" High, delighted voices. "Yes!" Robin's knees went weak. She sank into the desk chair, buried her face in her hands, and let herself shake. That night, everything fell apart. Robin woke to screaming. She bolted upright, heart hammering. The clock read 2:47 a.m. The screams came from across the hall. Robin ran barefoot into the twins' room, flipping on the light. Lyda lay in her bed, small body convulsing. Her skin was pale, lips tinged blue, vomit on the pillow, eyes rolled back. "Lloyd!" Robin screamed, dropping to her knees beside the bed. Call 911. She rolled Lyda onto her side, checked her airway, felt for a pulse. Weak, thready. Her forehead burned with fever. Alicia sat in her bed, screaming, hands pressed to her ears. Lloyd appeared in the doorway, took one look, and went white. But he pulled out his phone, fingers flying. Robin cradled Lyda's burning body. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Stay with me." But Lyda's eyes stayed closed, and Robin couldn't help but think, this is punishment. This is what happens when you play God. In the distance, sirens began to wail. The ambulance screamed through the night like a wounded animal. Robin sat in the back, holding Lyda's small hand, while the paramedic, a young woman with steady hands and kind eyes, worked to stabilize her vitals. IV line inserted, oxygen mask secured, temperature recorded at 104.3 degrees. "Possible febrile seizure," the paramedic said into her radio. 4-year-old female, semi-conscious, tachycardic, ETA 4 minutes. Lloyd sat across from them, face white as bone, hands gripping his knees so hard his knuckles had gone bloodless. He hadn't said a word since they'd loaded Lyda into the ambulance. Just stared at his daughter's small body, at the tubes and wires, at the way her chest rose and fell in shallow, uncertain breaths. Alicia had stayed behind with Mrs. Vaughan, Hanley still screaming. Robin could hear her cries echoing in her mind even now. "Mr. Zarate," Robin's voice cut through the siren's wail. "Look at me." Lloyd's eyes lifted, unfocused. "She's going to be okay," Robin said firmly. "Children spike fevers. Their systems fight hard. This could be flu, infection, any number of treatable things. You don't know that." His voice was hollow. "You can't know that. I know she's strong. I know she's fighting. That's enough." The ambulance lurched around a corner. The paramedic braced herself, never taking her eyes off Lyda's monitors. Lloyd looked down at his daughter, the child who might not be his, the truth he'd demanded to know, the secret Robin had burned to ash. "If she dies," his voice broke. "She won't. If she dies," he continued. "And I never knew. If I never got to tell her." "Tell her what?" Lloyd's face crumpled. "That it doesn't matter, that I don't care whose blood she has. That she's mine." Robin's throat tightened. The ambulance pulled up to the emergency entrance, doors flying open. The paramedics moved with practiced efficiency. Gurney lowered, wheels locked, running toward the bright lights of the ER entrance. Lloyd stumbled after them, but a nurse stopped him at the door. "Sir, you'll need to wait here. We'll update you as soon as we can." "That's my daughter." "I understand, sir, but we need room to work. Please." The nurse's voice was kind, but unyielding. Lloyd looked like he might argue. Then he saw Robin's face and seemed to deflate. "Come on," Robin said quietly, taking his arm. "Let them help her." The waiting room was purgatory, dressed in fluorescent lighting and plastic chairs. Lloyd paced for the first hour, back and forth across the worn linoleum, hands clasped behind his head, breathing like he'd just run a marathon. Robin sat in the corner, watching him, watching the clock, watching the door where doctors would eventually emerge with news that would either save or shatter him. Around 4 a.m., Lloyd finally stopped pacing. He stood in the middle of the waiting room staring at nothing, and his knees simply gave out. He didn't fall dramatically, just folded, slow and inevitable, until he was sitting on the floor, with his back against the wall, head in his hands. Robin moved to sit beside him, not touching, just present. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Lloyd's shoulders began to shake. He wept silently, the way men do when they've spent too long pretending to be stone. His breath came in ragged gasps. His hands covered his face like he could hide from his own grief. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered through his fingers. "I don't know how to be their father without her. I don't know how to look at them and not see all my failures. I don't know," his voice broke. "I don't know how to love them the way they deserve." Robin's own eyes burned. "You're doing it right now." "I'm failing. You're here." Robin's voice was fierce. "In a hospital waiting room at 4 a.m, terrified out of your mind, praying for your daughter to live. That's not failure. That's love." Lloyd looked at her then, face ravaged. "You burned the results." "Yes." "You knew which one wasn't mine." "Yes." "And you chose to protect me from it." Robin shook her head. "I chose to protect them, both of them, from a truth that would have poisoned everything." Lloyd's jaw clenched. "I had a right. You had a right to destroy your family for the sake of biology?" Robin leaned closer. "That's not a right. That's cowardice, dressed up as honesty. You don't understand." "I understand exactly." Robin's voice went quiet. "Because I failed once before. And it cost me everything." Lloyd went still. Robin took a shaky breath. 5 years ago, I had a daughter, Emma, born 3 months premature, because my body failed me. Failed her. Robin, she lived for 3 days, Robin continued, voice mechanical now, reciting facts to keep from drowning in them. 3 days of machines breathing for her, tubes feeding her, monitors counting down every heartbeat. I was recovering from surgery in the next wing. They wouldn't let me see her for the first 12 hours. Lloyd's hand found hers. She didn't pull away. When they finally wheeled me to the NICU, she was so small. 2 pounds, 4 ounces. You could see her heart beating through her chest. Robin's voice broke. I sang to her. That lullaby. The one I sing to your girls. I sang it over and over, pressing my hand icon against the incubator because I couldn't hold her. What happened? There was a staffing error. A nurse gave her the wrong medication dosage, double what she should have received. Robin's eyes fixed on the opposite wall. Her system couldn't handle it. She went into respiratory distress. By the time they realized the mistake, it was too late. Jesus! They tried to save her, worked on her for 47 minutes, but she was too small, too fragile. Robin's voice went flat. She died at 3:47 a.m. I was singing the last verse when her heart stopped. Lloyd's grip on her hand tightened. The hospital settled out of court, Robin continued. Paid me money that meant nothing. Fired the nurse who'd made the error, a young woman, new mother herself, working a double shift because they were understaffed. Everyone was sorry. Everyone said it wasn't my fault. It wasn't, but I was a nurse, Robin said. I knew the system. I knew the risks. And I was so focused on my own pain, my own complications, that I didn't advocate for her. Didn't fight hard enough, didn't stay vigilant. Robin, you were recovering from surgery. I failed her. Robin finally met his eyes. I failed my own child, and I've carried that for 5 years. Carried the guilt, the shame, the certainty that I didn't deserve to be anyone's mother. Lloyd's face softened. Is that why you do this? Care for other people's children? I do it, Robin said quietly, because I have to believe that some failures can be redeemed, that some losses can lead to saving someone else, that my daughter's death can mean something if I keep other children alive. She would mean something anyway, Lloyd said. She existed. She was loved. That's enough. Robin's throat closed. I failed my own child, but I won't fail yours. The words hung between them like a vow. Lloyd pulled her into his arms then, and Robin let herself be held, let herself shake, let herself grieve for the daughter she'd lost and the daughters she'd found, and the impossible, terrible weight of loving children in a world that could take them away in a heartbeat. At 6:23 a.m., a doctor emerged through the swinging doors. Robin and Lloyd stood as one. Mr. Zarate? The doctor, an older woman with gray hair and tired eyes, smiled. Your daughter is stable. It was a severe viral infection, complicated by the fever, but we've got her on antibiotics and fever reducers. She's sleeping comfortably now. Lloyd's knees nearly buckled. She's okay. She's going to be fine. We'll keep her for observation for 24 hours, but she should make a full recovery. Can I see her? In a few minutes. We're just finishing up some paperwork. The doctor's smile widened. She's asking for someone named Robin? Robin's breath caught. Lloyd looked at her. Go, please. Robin followed the doctor through the doors, down a corridor that smelled of antiseptic and fear, into a small room where Lyda lay in a bed that looked far too big for her small body. But her eyes were open, clear. Robin, she whispered. Robin crossed the room in 3 strides, sat beside the bed, and took Lyda's small hand. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. I was scared. I know, but you were so brave. Lyda's fingers tightened around Robin's. Don't leave. Never, Robin promised. Never, never, never. She sat there, holding Lyda's hand until the child fell back asleep. Then she stayed anyway, watching her breathe, counting each inhale like a prayer answered. When Lloyd finally came in, he stood at the foot of the bed for a long moment. Then he knelt beside Robin's chair. Thank you, he whispered, for everything, for staying, for burning those papers. His voice broke, for loving them when I couldn't figure out how. Robin touched his shoulder. You always knew how. You just forgot to forgive yourself first. The news broke 3 days later. Tech Titan's twin scandal. DNA secrets. Zarate Holdings. Someone had leaked information about the DNA test. Not the results, those were ash, but the fact that Lloyd had ordered one. Speculation ran rampant across business news sites and social media. One of Zarate's daughters, not his biological child, the headlines screamed. Board members called emergency meetings. Stock prices dropped. Investors demanded answers. Lloyd stood at his study window, staring out at the garden where the twins played, oblivious to the storm gathering around their family. Robin stood beside him. They'll tear me apart, Lloyd said quietly. Demand I prove paternity. Question my fitness to lead the company. Let them try, Robin said. You'll fight. We'll fight. Lloyd looked at her. Wita, I'm not going anywhere, Robin said. Not until this is over. Not until your daughters are safe. Outside, Alicia and Lyda chased each other through the flowers, their laughter bright as bells. And for the first time in years, Lloyd smiled. Then we fight, he said. The storm was coming, but they would face it together. The siege began on a Wednesday morning. Robin woke to the sound of car doors slamming, voices shouting, the mechanical whir of camera shutters firing in rapid succession. She went to the window and her stomach dropped. The estate gates were surrounded. News vans lined the street. Reporters clustered on the sidewalk. Cameras aimed at the house like weapons. Photographers perched on stepladders, trying to get shots over the iron fence. Zarate to address paternity scandal, read the headline on her phone. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m., less than 2 hours away. Robin dressed quickly and found Lloyd in his study, standing at the window in a charcoal suit, staring out at the circus below. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. He turned. His face was pale but resolved. "I'm sure about them." He nodded toward the twins' room upstairs. "Everything else, I'll figure out." "What are you going to say?" Lloyd picked up a stack of index cards from his desk, then set them down again. "I don't know. My lawyers wrote a statement, carefully worded. Admits nothing. Protects the company." He looked at her. "But it feels like cowardice." "Then don't use it. If I tell the truth, the whole truth, the board could remove me. The company could collapse. Everything I've built will mean nothing," Robin finished, "if you lose your daughters in the process." Lloyd's jaw tightened. Then he nodded. "Will you stand with me? You and the girls?" Robin's heart clenched. "Lloyd, bringing the twins out there? I'm not asking them to speak. I'm not asking them to perform." His voice was steady. "I'm asking them to stand with their father, to show the world that we're a family, regardless of what anyone else thinks." Robin studied him. The man who'd been too afraid to eat dinner with his daughters 3 weeks ago was now ready to claim them publicly, to shield them with his own body against a world that would judge and dissect and tear them apart. "All right," she said, "we'll stand with you." At 9:45 a.m., Robin walked the twins downstairs. They wore matching white dresses, simple, elegant, appropriate. Alicia held Robin's left hand. Lyda held her right. Both girls had been briefed gently. "Daddy needs to talk to some people. We're going to stand with him and show them we're together. You don't have to say anything. Just hold my hand." They'd nodded, solemn and trusting. Mrs. Hanley waited by the front door, eyes red. "The podium is set up in the front garden. Security has cleared a space. The lawyers are already positioning themselves." She looked at Lloyd. "Last chance to use their statement, sir." Lloyd shook his head. "No lawyers. Just family." He knelt in front of his daughters. "You don't have to be scared," he said softly. "I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise." Alicia touched his cheek. "We're not scared, Daddy. We have you. And Robin." Lloyd's eyes glistened. He stood, offered Robin his arm. "Ready?" "Ready." They opened the door. The noise was immediate and overwhelming. Reporters shouted questions all at once, voices overlapping into chaos. "Mr. Zarate, is it true one of your daughters isn't biologically yours? Did your wife have an affair? Will this affect your position at Zarate Holdings? Mr. Zarate, Mr. Zarate, over here." Security guards held them back, but barely. Cameras flashed like lightning. Microphones thrust forward like spears. Lloyd walked steadily to the podium, Robin and the twins beside him. The girls stayed close, gripping her hands, but they didn't cry, didn't hide. They stood straight and small and impossibly brave. Lloyd adjusted the microphone. The crowd didn't quiet. "Please," he said, voice firm. "Please," slowly. The chaos subsided to a tense, expectant silence. Lloyd looked out at the sea of faces, reporters hungry for scandal, photographers ready to catch any crack in his armor. cameras broadcasting this moment to millions. He took a deep breath. My name is Lloyd Jonathan Zarate. I'm a father. That's the most important thing I'll say today. His voice carried clear and strong. 3 months ago, I was a man drowning in grief, rage, and fear. My wife had died. My daughters had stopped speaking, and I had convinced myself that the only way to survive was to lock everything painful behind closed doors and pretend it didn't exist. Robin felt the twins' hands tighten around hers. Then someone came into my life who refused to let me hide. Lloyd's eyes found Robin's. She taught my daughters to speak again, to laugh again, to trust again, and in doing so, she taught me something I'd forgotten. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who stays. A murmur rippled through the crowd. You want to know if both of my daughters are biologically mine? Lloyd's voice hardened. You want me to produce DNA results, to quantify love in percentages and genetic markers, to somehow prove that these two beautiful girls deserve to be called my children. He paused, letting the words settle. I won't do that, not because I'm hiding anything, but because it doesn't matter. These are my daughters. I have loved them since the day they were born. I will love them until the day I die, and anyone who suggests that love has conditions or requirements or qualifications has never actually understood what it means to be a parent. The silence was absolute now. My late wife made choices I may never fully understand. She carried secrets that died with her. But those secrets don't change this fundamental truth. Alicia and Lyda are mine, not because of genetics, not because of paperwork, but because I choose them. Every day, every moment, forever. His voice broke slightly, then steadied. If that makes me unfit to lead a company, so be it. If that makes me weak in the eyes of those who value profit over people, fine. I'll step down. I'll walk away. Because nothing is more important than these two girls having a father who loves them without question. Lloyd looked down at his daughters. Then he did something no one expected. He stepped away from the podium, knelt on the grass, and opened his arms. Alicia and Lyda let go of Robin's hands and ran to him. They crashed into him with the force of small comets, wrapping their arms around his neck, burying their faces in his shoulders. And Lloyd held them like he was drowning, and they were air. Cameras clicked. A few reporters wiped their eyes. When Lloyd finally stood, lifting both girls, one in each arm, he turned back to the microphone. This press conference is over, he said quietly. My daughters and I are going inside to have breakfast. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with my lawyers. But as of today, my family is off limits. We're done being your story. He turned and walked back toward the house, Robin following close behind. The reporters stood in stunned silence. Then someone started clapping. It spread through the crowd. Not all of them, but enough. By the time Lloyd reached the door, the sound was almost deafening. 6 months later. The mansion was quieter now. Lloyd had stepped back from daily operations at Zarate Holdings, maintaining board membership but ceding Kyo responsibilities to someone who actually wanted the stress. The company had weathered the scandal. Stock prices had recovered. Life moved on, as it always did. Robin walked through the garden in the late afternoon sun, watching autumn paint the trees in shades of amber and rust. The twins ran ahead of her, chasing each other through fallen leaves, their laughter bright as bells. "Robin, look!" Alicia held up a leaf the size of her face. "It's a heart." "It's beautiful, sweetheart." "Mine's a star." Lida twirled with her leaf held high. Robin smiled. 6 months ago, these children had been silent ghosts. Now they were noise and color and joy incarnate. She'd stayed, of course, not as their nanny. That word felt wrong now, but as something harder to define. Family friend, trusted guardian, the woman who'd sung them back to life. And with Lloyd's funding, she'd opened the Red Haven, a foundation providing free childcare and support services for single parents, families in crisis, and children who'd lost someone. The building was downtown, bright and welcoming, already serving 30 families. But Robin still spent most of her time here, in this garden, with these girls. "Robin," Lida called. "Come play with us." Robin settled onto the stone bench near the roses, the same bench where she and Lloyd had first really talked, where he'd admitted he didn't know how to reach his daughters. The twins climbed into her lap, warm and solid and alive. "Tell us a story," Alicia demanded. "About a princess," Lida added. "A princess who fights dragons?" "No," Alicia said seriously. "A princess who talks to dragons and makes them good." Robin laughed. "All right. Once upon a time." She was mid-story when she felt someone watching. She looked up. Lloyd stood in the garden archway, the same position he'd occupied 6 months ago, frozen and disbelieving as he'd watched his daughters sleep peacefully for the first time. But now, he wasn't frozen. He was smiling. Robin met his eyes over the twins' heads. He mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." She nodded. "You're welcome." He didn't come closer, didn't interrupt, just stood there, bearing witness to this ordinary, extraordinary moment. His daughters at peace, held by someone who'd chosen to love them, bathed in golden autumn light. The garden hummed with late-season bees. Somewhere a bird sang. The twins nestled deeper into Robin's arms, listening to her story with rapt attention. And Robin thought about the journey that had brought her here, the daughter she'd lost, the guilt she'd carried, the broken family she'd found, the healing that had occurred in unexpected ways. She thought about Evelyn, who'd died protecting secrets that had almost destroyed what she'd loved most. She thought about the lullaby that had connected past to present, grief to joy, loss to redemption. She thought about how love wasn't always simple, or clean, or easy, but it was always worth fighting for. "Robin?" Lida's small voice interrupted her thoughts. "What happens next?" Robin looked down at the little girl in her arms, the child whose paternity had nearly torn a family apart, who now sat peaceful and loved and unburdened by truths she was too young to understand. "What happens next," Robin said softly, "is that everyone lives happily ever after." "Really?" Alicia looked skeptical. "Really?" Robin pulled them closer. "Because they learned that the best kind of family is the one you choose, the one that stays." The twins smiled, and from the archway, Lloyd closed his eyes and let himself breathe. The estate stood quiet now, no longer haunted by ghosts or grief or unanswered questions, just a house full of people learning to be a family, just a garden where children laughed, just a man, a woman, and 2 little girls who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen, against all odds, to walk back into the light, together. That evening, After the twins were asleep, Robin stood in the garden one last time. Lloyd joined her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. He offered her one. "To new beginnings," he said. Robin clinked her glass against his. "To choosing love." They stood in comfortable silence, watching fireflies begin their slow dance through the dusk. "I never thanked you properly," Lloyd said, "for burning those results, for protecting them, for protecting me from myself." Robin shook her head. "You would have made the right choice eventually." "I'm not so sure." Lloyd took a sip of wine. "I was so caught up in needing to know, to quantify, to make sense of something that could never make sense. You gave me permission to just love them, without conditions, without proof." "That's all they ever needed," Robin said, "to be loved without question." Lloyd looked at her. "What about you? What do you need?" Robin smiled. "I have it, right here. A purpose, a family, a reason to keep singing." From the house, faint and sweet, came the sound of one of the twins singing in their sleep. "Hush now, baby. The river runs low." Robin's throat tightened. "She remembers," Lloyd whispered. "They both do." Robin's voice was soft. "Some songs stay with us longer than memory, longer than pain. They become part of who we are." Lloyd set down his wine glass and pulled her into a gentle embrace. Not romantic, not yet, maybe not ever, but something deeper, grateful, family. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair, "for teaching us what love sounds like again." Robin held him, held this broken man who'd learned to be whole, and thought, sometimes it takes a stranger to teach a house full of wealth what love sounds like again. Sometimes it takes burning the truth to save what matters most. Sometimes it takes losing everything to find what you were meant to protect. And sometimes, just sometimes, it takes a lullaby sung in the darkness to guide everyone home. The fireflies danced, the garden breathed, and somewhere in the house, 2 little girls slept peacefully, held by dreams instead of nightmares, loved without condition, safe at last.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.